Welcome to the Empower LEP Podcast. I'm your host, Jana Parker, licensed educational psychologist, group practice owner, and mentor at Empower LEP. Today, I'm hosting my HR consultant. Her name is Shawn Jough, and she is with Strategic HR Advisory. That is her company, so she's an entrepreneur herself. She has been so helpful, and today we really get into when you might need HR support, what it can do for you. And then we get into the topic of employees, W-2 employees versus contractors, because that's a hot topic. It comes up a lot. And I just wanted to bring somebody on to this podcast who could talk about it from a professional perspective. So I think she answered a lot of questions for me. I really tried to ask her questions that might come up in the field. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Welcome to the Empower LEP Podcast. I'm here today with Shawn Jough. Welcome, Shawn.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to talk to you. So Shawn is my HR advisor, and her company is Strategic HR Advisory. And it took me kind of maybe too long to decide that it was time to do some HR consulting, but I'm really happy that I am. And I thought, Shawn, you would be a fantastic person to bring on and talk about HR just kind of in general, because it's not really something that we know much about in schools. Except for the people who hire us and that we go to if we have a complaint. And then I want to get into talking about some of the things that come up in educational psychology in our practices. So, yeah. I guess my first question for you then is, tell us a little bit about Strategic HR Advisory, how you kind of came into starting this company, because this is also about entrepreneurship. So yeah. I would love to hear a little bit about your path and how what became inspiring for you enough to make it a business.
Sure.
And then what you do, of course.
I just kind of fell into HR like many people. They don't always pick, the career picks them. And I studied international business. I'm in San Diego, so I went to San Diego State. And then when I graduated, I realized, I don't speak Spanish, which was not great for me getting an international business job in San Diego. And so I ended up becoming a recruiter as my first, real job out of school. And that just kind of led me down the path of HR, and I love it. And I worked internally for a long time. And in my last company, I was there for 10 years. I was the VP of HR. And I knew the owner was kind of, looking to his succession plan or retire. And so we'd had many conversations about that. And when the time came, we kind of whittled the company down from over 600 employees to 5. Yeah. And then it was okay, you don't really need, a VP of HR for 5 employees, although he was so gracious and would have found work for me. It was just time. And, I'd interviewed for places and it just didn't feel right for me to work somewhere else. And even when I was there, I was kind of looking and following, if you know Tory Burch, she has a whole entrepreneur thing. And so I'd kind of look at that every once in a while, and it was in my mind. And so I just decided, I thought maybe I'll get a coffee shop, maybe I'll do something like this. But somebody said, why don't you do consulting for, some of my clients? I was an insurance broker. And so I kind of started that way slowly. And then I realized, this is so much fun. I love it. I love helping people grow their businesses and keeping them out of trouble, because HR, especially in California, is so complex, and you don't know what you don't know. And it can get you in a lot of trouble if you're not following the right processes. And so now, we've been in business since 2019, and we work with a variety of clients, but we do happen to have a lot of clients in the mental health practice space. So we've gotten really familiar with the nuances in that area. But we also work with construction, and we have a matchmaking client. We have such fun clients, and a lot of them are multi-state now too. So that's another fun dynamic. Just understanding the compliances that, California has their rules, but if you hire an employee in Arizona, you've got to now follow Arizona rules. So we deal with a lot of that and just helping people understand. And our team is growing, and so we're really excited about that. and just being able to help, continue to support our clients.
That's awesome. How many employees do you have at this
So we
point?
are still small. We have 3 people in Southern California in addition to me. And then we have, a couple uh, contractors. I have somebody who works in the Philippines, so we're going to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
And the risks. But I do have somebody who's a contractor, works in the Philippines, and does like admin for me. And
Okay.
then we also have like, we outsource the things like probably you're familiar with the bookkeeping and the social media. Those are outsourced to third party companies.
Yep. Yep. Well, awesome. Well, congratulations on building your company and your like passion project that's becoming or that has become your life, kind of like my practice has.
Low organic growth, it's definitely the life. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's really great.
thank
And
you.
then what's great for you is like, you know how to hire people.
But it's a blessing and a curse because it makes me very picky because I see all the things that happen. And so for me to hire somebody is like, it's I interview very carefully. I'm like, just
Yeah.
extra critical.
Yeah. Hiring is no joke. I mean, I have now been through, different people in different positions, and every time you hire someone, learn about their personality, their work ethic, their kind of like way, it just, and then like as you're letting people go, um, so many things come up that teach you so much, right? And
Yeah.
I guess kind of the bottom line is that you want to make sure that you're doing everything right so that when things happen, uh, you're in the best possible position with the least amount of risk, I guess I would
Yeah.
say, for like what could happen.
Yeah. Exactly. Like having the, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, making sure you've done everything right from the beginning. And then, of course, the other piece is just the culture. If you're being clear and it doesn't work out, it's like having respect for each other. Those things will go a long way in protecting your organization.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you just a couple of, I guess, business related questions, and then I want to get into a topic. Um, as people are thinking about starting their own practice, is there a need for HR consulting as like an individual solopreneur um, starting a business?
Yeah. I think it depends on your goals, on how quickly you think you might grow your practice. Like, if you're going to hire, your friends who went to school with you that you know really well, maybe there's a little bit less risk for you in terms of, somebody claiming a lawsuit or going bad. But if you are posting on Indeed and you're looking, and I would say like hiring strangers, people, then I would be extra careful and, maybe working with a consultant, maybe, going to, if you're in California, Cal Chamber and getting some templates, subscribing to that service and just making sure that you're doing things right from the beginning.
What did you
You
just
know,
say? Cal Chamber?
yeah, Cal Chamber, HR. Let me see what exactly are we calling it? I think it's um,
Like writing this down. Like,
HR California, presented by Cal Chamber. You can get like a membership there. Maybe it's $500, and they give you templates and forms and things like that. So if you're
okay.
small, that could be more affordable than hiring a consultant. But for us, we have something called an HR Jumpstart. And so if somebody's like, I know I'm going to grow, there's a need for what I'm doing, and I just want, help with that, then we'll walk through and create, a handbook, the onboarding forms, injury, illness, prevent, like all the things that are required, and just make sure that you really understand them too. Like, the sick pay, we've talked about that, like sick pay, vacation, all the nuances. Like sometimes you don't have the time to go through a Cal Chamber, or even if you're going through it, you don't really understand what it all means. And so
Right.
that's where we come in to help interpret that and make sure that your policies are compliant.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when do you feel like it might be time to have HR kind of on your team, I guess, like
Yeah.
the kind of constant HR support or,
Yeah.
not
I
constant,
feel
but
like when you get to 15 to 20 employees, that's when I tend to see our clients like reach out more because you just start having more leave of absences and, things that are harder to manage. You'll get, more of these interesting cases where it's like, okay, I've never experienced this. What do I do for this person? And so that's where we start seeing people like maybe need one of our ongoing retainer services just to help them manage. And it takes the stress off. Like if you have your own day-to-day job and HR can be a lot. So we'll help with everything from hiring to, end of employment and executing that.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that I even realized when I started out that there were people who were doing HR consulting like this. You think like, oh, companies like have internal HR. Do I have to hire somebody for that? But it's nice to know that there are kind of like consulting services
Yeah.
available.
It's its own world, and HR started years back. It was definitely more of an administrative role, but it's grown, it's changed and evolved in the last like 20, 30 years. And it can be more strategic if you think about it. If you think about what HR is really meant to be and it's helping manage your people, motivate your people. Of course, there's a compliance piece, but most of us know if you've done, do some research in this area, like happy employees are productive employees. And, if you're not keeping them satisfied, then, they're probably just billing time or doing things that are, undermining what you're doing because they're not happy. So it's really an important piece. And it should be a part of your strategy as you grow your business.
Can you just speak a little bit more to that? That's so interesting. Like how, maybe an example or two of how you help in that kind of like people happiness space.
Yeah, I think any business when you're starting out, it's really important to think through like, what do I really want this to look like? What is my vision for the company, my mission and my values? And then you incorporate that in everything that you're doing, from hiring to performance development, and even when you exit somebody. So you're always thinking about like, what are those important, values? And when you're aligned with your employees, like there's a greater chance that they're going to be satisfied if you guys have the same kind of mission and same goals for the organization. Sometimes we see misalignment where, maybe an owner, I mean, I'll give you this example because it was kind of recent, somebody who has more of a authoritative style, and then they're hiring somebody who's, very, needs a lot of reassurance. And you can just see, okay, this is never gonna work out. Like, it's trying to put that round peg in. And so of course
Yeah.
the employee's not happy, the manager's not happy, and then it just leads to, you're spending a lot of time wasted on not on running the business or satisfying your clients, but just internally trying to manage this chaos.
I had something like that happen to me. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
On both sides. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I once was like on the receiving end of not feeling like I had a positive relationship with a manager, which was strange for me because I always did. So it was weird for me to not. And then on the other side, like being a boss and having a clash with somebody else because I could tell they didn't feel super comfortable. Like they had
Yeah.
a lot of anxiety and like I didn't know how to help that, like
How
there,
to
I felt like
navigate
there
it.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was challenging.
And it's a
Um,
distractor. It's a distractor from the job of what you're trying to do. So,
yeah,
clear job descriptions, clear communication on what you expect, having the SOPs, like this is how we work, just, from the beginning. And
yeah,
that interview is really important. We could spend like lots of time just talking about that because I think a lot of times when we interview, we tell people like, this is what we're looking for. And then they're like, okay, yeah, that's me because they want a job.
yeah,
Versus being more strategic with the questions and asking, open-ended questions to see if they'll get to the values that you already have. So
yeah,
it's a whole other thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe we'll bring you back for another podcast and talk about interviewing. We could
Yeah.
just do a whole series. Maybe we will.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll do like a course. um, okay, so you can see my brain. I'm like, oh, we
I
could do.
know. You have
Yeah,
the
yeah,
entrepreneur spirit.
yeah. Um, Okay, so what I really want to get into for our topic of the day is talking about contractors versus employees, W-2 employees. And I bring this up because I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and I lead this group of amazing entrepreneurs trying to figure out and navigate the business space. And um, we're also kind of in this world where a lot of people who do the job that we do in private practice is a side hustle. It's like a side gig. It's like you're doing it a little bit. Either you're doing it yourself a little bit, or someone has asked you to come on and do it a little bit, and you have a
Mhm.
full time school psychologist job. Um, and then we're also like once you start doing it, people start uh it kind of snowballs like you were saying with your practice, like
Mhm.
it kind of snowballs, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm too busy. I need to bring other people on." And then like, "Oh, I just need them to cover this real quick or cover that." And so I think we are in a prime space to kind of get in this conflict, like, what should I be doing? Should these
Mhm.
people that I'm hiring, or should I be a contractor? Like, this company is telling me they're going to contract me. What does that mean? What's the difference? And I mean, and I don't think that anybody who is coming from schools is thinking about this at all. They're just like, "Oh, they're going to contract me. Great." Or,
Yeah.
"Oh, now I can get some write-offs for on my taxes or something." But I think that there's more underneath that I would love a professional in the space to explain, so that we can just kind of provide this knowledge so then people can make more informed
Yeah.
decisions about what they're doing.
It's a super complicated space, and in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, it's definitely become more challenging in the mental health space because of AB5 and some of the carve outs. And I would say, if they're going to hire, if a company wants to hire you as a contractor, there's less risk for you as the contractor than there is for the company. They have the burden, they're the ones that are going to get audited. So if you're doing it as a contractor, the most important thing is just knowing that you're going to pay the taxes, the double taxes. So if you work for a school and then you're doing this on the side, when you file taxes, you're also going to pay the employer portion that the company normally would have paid. If you think about like FICA, Social Security, and Medicare that comes out of your check, your paycheck, an employer matches that amount. So now you're on the hook for paying that too. So that's typically why a contractor might have a little bit of a higher wage rate than an employee because of the taxes and the other benefits that come on top of it. But in that situation, it's more of the company's risk and liability. And so on the other side, if you're growing your practice and you're like, okay, I need to hire help, then it's, of course, it's your burden. Now, if you're going to bring somebody as a contractor, you have to be able to prove that they should be a contractor if something comes up, like an audit, or if anybody's questioning it. How it comes up is usually, you hire a contractor, and then maybe they have to go on maternity leave, or they get disabled or something, and they file with the state and they say, "Oh, I'm working with this employer," and then the state doesn't see that they have wages when they look at the payroll record, so that will trigger an audit for your business. And if you get audited, then of course there's, back taxes and things like that they might charge you for, and it can get a little bit ugly. Or the person who you hired as a contractor sues you for something if the relationship goes south, and then they could claim, I didn't get my meal and rest breaks, I didn't get overtime, I didn't get this and that, plus you didn't pay my taxes. So there's a myriad of ways it can go south if you're hiring somebody and they're misclassified and they should have been an employee versus a contractor.
Okay. That's really helpful. So take us to kind of the beginning and explain what AB5 is and what it is.
Yeah.
Period.
So
Yeah.
states have different, rules on who can be considered a contractor. So California had already had some rules in place, and you had to go through this Borello test. And then AB5 came in and just really made it a little bit stricter, and who can, they kind of default like anybody that you're bringing on to do work for your business. is an employee unless you can prove and meet these other exceptions. So they kind of default as like they should be an employee unless you prove otherwise. And so with the AB5, there's the ABC test, which is like 3 prongs. I think I have it up here. Let me just see. So first, and they have to meet all 3 in order to be considered, an independent contractor. But workers free from control and direction of the hiring entity. The worker performs work that's outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So this is where a lot of us get tripped up. And then the workers customarily engaged in independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature. So essentially that means if you were going to hire, another person to join your team, they would, maybe be doing that for other clients on their own. So you don't have control. And also what they're doing is not what you do as a business. So if you're offering assessments, as an example, and you're hiring somebody else to do assessments, assessments is what you're advertising, what your business does. So you may have a hard time proving that they should be an independent contractor. Now, I guess this is where it gets a little complicated. AB5 also has several like carve outs. So if you're hiring somebody who's a licensed psychologist, maybe as an example, so they've already, got their license or license with the state, then you follow the Borello test. And I can share this with you, the link, California lays it out really well, but the Borello test is more of like a multi-factor test. So it has some of the same components, but it's not like it has to be these 3 things 100%. It's more, there's a little bit more discretion in it, but still the basis is similar, if that makes sense. I know it's like really confusing and hard to explain, but so if they're a licensed psychologist, you have to go through this other test.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I'll send it to you because it is complicated.
Yeah. And that's helpful too, because, sometimes, like I have friends who are licensed psychologists and they hire other licensed psychologists, but they're all W-2 because they probably didn't pass that Braille test, right? And it probably has something to do with like, we're all doing the same kind of work. And if that's the case, then they're employees. But like, if I bring a licensed psychologist into my practice to do something that is different from the LEP work and assessments that we're doing, like let's say we're all doing psychoeducational evaluations and I bring a licensed psychologist in to do only autism assessment, which we as educational psychologists are not doing autism only assessment, then that might be a reason I could contract a licensed psychologist.
That might be a case to do that. And then in a perfect world, like the best way to protect yourself is if you had a business to business relationship with them. So if they have their own practice, so then their practice is billing your practice and it's not like an individual, like you're paying Dr. So-and-so.
Yeah. I actually did have that happen with a coach that I had on early on, where they were a coach and they had their own coaching business.
Mm-hmm.
And also I wasn't a coach, so I was a psychologist. So I was contracting a coach into my company who had their own corporation.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to, point A, the worker is free from your control and direction in performing the work. I take that to mean in our field, we are all licensed professionals, right? So we all already know how to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
However, in my practice, there's no way if somebody starts coming and working for me that I'm just going to be like, do your own thing and put my company name on it.
Right.
So I feel like I do have, and I tell them like, you tell me your schedule, but we're going to schedule you then, and then you're going to come into the office and you're going to do the work there and you're going to use my stuff.
Yeah. That's an employee.
Right.
If they're working under your umbrella, like a good situation would be like, the old scenario is like if you're a baker and you're hiring a plumber, that's clear. The plumber can be an independent contractor. But now if you're like a baker and you're going to bring in another baker to help with things, that's what you do. That's what your business is. Like, they need to be an employee, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to hire, if your business is, you know, doing assessments and you hire somebody who does graphic design, marketing, that's clear. They can be an independent person. It doesn't necessarily have to be B2B. You know, you could have them as an independent contractor. Um, HR, you know, I have my own business, but sometimes there's HR consultants that are like sole props. Like, you could hire an HR person just like that and have them do that, because that's not what your business is. And you wouldn't have discretion of what I'm doing. You know, you're not telling me how to do my job because you're hiring me for my expertise and how I'm doing it, right? So that's part of what I bring to your business is, you know, knowing HR. So that's a perfect example of when that might, you know, come into play. But if you're giving somebody an email, you're saying, hey, you can use our EHR system, you know, all of this, you're giving them all these tools, that most likely is somebody who should be classified as an employee, because they're not working independently, you know, without, you know, your guidance, your tools, your operations. Or, you know, in the therapist space, like you're scheduling them clients, you know, you're doing that. They're not bringing in their own clients, but you're now telling them, here's your schedule, you know, we're booking you. That's more of an employee relationship than, you know, an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm. What about if, I mean, this comes up a lot. And so, again, my goal is to just like give guidance to our field. What if you're like, I just have too much work to do. I need some, I'm going to just kind of bring in a couple of my friends who I know can help me do some assessments, right? Like, maybe they're not even doing a full assessment. Maybe they're just helping you with pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or, you know, oh, and they're going to do, you know, this for me, but they have a full-time job. Like, what would you say about a situation like that? Because it happens a lot. Like, we get busy and we're like, I just need some help.
Yeah.
I know this person does good work because I worked with them in the school district, you know. um, what should people be thinking about?
I would say, you know, what I always advise people is like, what is your risk tolerance? You know, because you can pay them through your accounting. Your accountant, if you have a bookkeeper or if you're, you know, doing it on your own, they might question you a little bit about it, but you can pay anybody. If you just want to pay your friend Maria, I'm going to give you $100 if you do this. Sure, you can do that. The risk is if you ever get audited, you know, so you just have to think, you know, maybe there's a low risk of your friend, you know, trying to sue you or, you know, do anything like that. Like, the chances you get in trouble for it are pretty low, you know. But if it's an ongoing issue, or if it's your advertising, you know, to hire somebody doing a role like that, I think that's where more of the exposure comes in. Or if you do get an audit because of something else you've done, they're going to look through everything, including what you paid Maria. And then they might, you know, give you some trouble about that, and you'll be on the hook for, I don't know all the penalties, but I know at least, you know, you're going to pay the FICA and the other taxes. Like, that's what California really wants, right? They want their taxes, and they'll tell you they want to make sure employees are given the benefits that they should have, which is the sick pay, it's the workers' comp, it's the disability, all those things that you get as an employee. And that's why they really care about the misclassifications.
Hmm. And I think it's, if you pay somebody $600 or more, you have to give them a 1099 at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that might have changed. I thought that the standard, I can't remember what it is right now, but yeah, you have to give them a 1099 and they have to claim it and they have to pay the taxes on it. Yeah.
Um, okay, so and then I want to ask this question, but I think I want to ask the other first. So if because number or letter C is, um, the worker is customarily engaged in something else. Like, I consider that to be like, oh, well, they work full time in a school district and they're just doing this part time. Like,
Mm.
they're just doing this with me on the side. Um, is that, am I understanding that correctly?
I would say it's more like I have my independent business doing this. Not so much that they're doing it for school, but it's more like I'm also offering these services to other people. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that's more can lead to somebody being an independent contractor if they're doing this for multiple people.
Got it.
If that makes sense. So if I'm working for you as a full-time person and as an independent contractor, again, then that shows a need that, you need that many hours. It's probably an employee role. But if I have several clients that I'm providing HR services to, then that kind of will help contribute to this, me passing this test.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's helpful.
A
Um,
website, you have a website that they're offering their services, that's even better. Business cards, so that those types of things will show that they're an independent contractor and not your employee.
okay. So let's talk, like, I want to give you a scenario because I feel like this could come up because there are companies that like everybody's a contractor, right? Like everyone's a contractor. And let's say the person was, I mean, they might even live in a different place in California, right? Like I contract people
Mhm.
throughout California. One of my contractors is flying to another area to go do an assessment at a school district or for a family, and they get injured.
Mm,
What could happen?
yeah, it's a big risk, right?
Well,
'Cause
right. I think the
they're not
question is
gonna
why. Like, who is it risky for? Because I think this is like these are the things that I don't think that we realize, right?
think
So
through. Yeah.
maybe we take it from both sides. Like, I'm the owner of the business, or I'm the contractor who's now injured.
Yeah. I mean, if the contractor or their family, if it was somebody with a company's based in California or a state that, they don't really, it's a little gray on whether they should be an independent contractor,
Well, this is all
they,
California.
yeah.
Let's just
So it's
even
in
stick in
California.
California.
So they could try to sue, the family can try to sue on their behalf of, one, they should have had health insurance. Now they don't have health insurance to cover their injuries. And two, they're traveling on behalf of work. So it should have been workers' comp and now they don't have any coverage. So it's all the liability that now they're taking that burden on themselves. So that is like a worst case scenario, but it's true. If they're driving to a school or something like that, they get in a car accident. If they were an employee, they would be covered by workers' comp for that. So if you don't have workers' comp, who's going to pay it? Um, Car insurance, attorneys, if they get an attorney involved, they're probably going to look and say, oh, you were working on behalf of her company, like you should have had coverage. So it's not always that the contractor is going to think of these things, but the attorneys will.
Right. I was just literally on the phone because I'm like getting new insurances, and I've been talking to a bunch of insurance brokers, and we're talking about like all the different kinds of insurance that I should have because
Yeah.
again, like what they said yesterday is it's not necessarily the person who works for you, but their attorney is going to like start being like, "Oh, do you have what is it, hired non-owned auto or something insurance?" And I'm like,
Is that
"But
what
I
it's
mean,
called? Yeah. If you have anybody driving on your behalf regularly, you have to make sure you have coverage that will, protect your organization in case they have an accident or, they hit somebody, somebody hits them, it could
right,
happen.
because like they have car insurance. Like I did have somebody get in a car accident on their way to something, and I was like, okay, I mean, she's fine, and like she had insurance, but if that had been worse,
Yeah.
and she was injured, I do have workers' comp, but if for some reason there was an attorney involved, I think they would be wondering if I had the
Yeah.
auto, whatever that
Whatever the
is.
policy is. Yeah. Even the, that person's their car insurance may want to like include somebody else on it. I can't remember, they call it subrogate or something, but they would add somebody else into the claim so that they don't have the full burden. So they don't want to pay
Mhm.
everything. So they want to shift it. It's the same reason if you ever go to the doctors and it says, were you injured as a part of work? Like, if you go to Kaiser, like they want to know, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be paying this. Maybe some of this should be billed to somebody else. So it's all
Yeah.
shifting blame and cost.
So it's really, so let's kind of, so it's really, it's the owner of the business who has that risk.
It's their responsibility, their risk. Yeah. And it's all if something happens and if you get sued, I always think it's like that old, like, do you feel lucky punk kind of, thing. Like, how comfortable do you feel with if you're skirting those gray lines? It's just, if you're pretty risk tolerant and you don't mind and you don't think anything's going to happen, like, it's your choice. But, I don't have a high risk tolerance. I like to follow the rules. Obviously, I'm in HR, so I want to have the insurance. I want to have, from the beginning, I made sure all of my, anybody I brought on as an employee because, it's what I do. So I guess it would be a little bit weird if I wasn't doing that, right? If I'm not following the rules.
Yeah.
But also it's it's the right way to operate, the business for me.
Yeah. I mean, and so like from the owner side, as you know, because I think when people think like, oh, I'm gonna hire people, this is like such a big deal. It is a big deal, but how do we kind of get past the like what are the benefits of having people be W-2, and how do we not think about it as like, oh, this is like a big burden, or like, oh, that's going to be so hard? Are there, tips or something you can give us?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to like to manage people or have a plan and process in your mind for who's going to manage the team. Like maybe you have to hire a practice manager, an office manager if you're not comfortable with that side. But I think you have to have that mindset of like, I'm going to be a manager. And I know sometimes people are like, I don't like that part at all. So then maybe you should rethink whether you want to grow your business. Maybe you increase your rates, maybe you do it a different way because that is a big part of it. And inevitably, you're going to hire somebody that is going to need more management than somebody else, more leadership, more guidance. But I think that there are a lot of benefits. You just having that person that's dedicated to your organization that can help you in different ways. My first HR consultant, like she's amazing. She brings different ideas from other places that she's worked. Like so, she has a depth of experience, but she also helps. Like we should do this for marketing. We should do this. I'm like, oh, that's great. So that's a kind of I think commitment that you get when people are like an employee with you versus like just a contractor and they're working for several people and maybe they don't have the same dedication to or loyalty to your organization.
I completely agree. I mean, I will admit when I started out, I needed help and I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, right? And so I did have a couple people do a couple of assessments where they contracted with me, and I just had I what I realized when I was contracting these people is that I cared too much about the work that they were doing because it was my business, right? So like anything
Yeah.
they were doing, it was mine. And so I poured into them, and they were also my friends and I like loved them. So I mean,
Yeah.
I totally poured into them, and ultimately I knew that they wanted to have their own practices and they did go do that. But I realized like, okay, when I bring people into this practice, like they do need to be employees. Of course, at that time, this was like 5 years ago, like I learned more along the way. And then I thought, okay, like when I bring somebody on, I know it's going to take a lot of me, and I want these people to be kind of committed to my
Hmm.
practice. And so I want to create a culture and an environment where they feel like they can access me and I can be like helpful and I can help them with their cases and make them feel like a part of this community, right? And then at that point,
Yeah.
I really needed to get a space where I felt like we could connect with other people while we were here together instead of just maybe having like one room office and people were like coming into the office and only one person could be there at a time, right?
Hmm.
I had to really start thinking about how am I going to create the community that I want to have within my practice. And that was what I wanted for me, right? Like everybody's going to be different, but I love having employees. Like
Yeah.
it's more expensive for sure, and it's more of everything, but it's totally worth it for what I wanted to develop it for
Yeah.
my practice.
Yeah, and for me it was, kind of similar. Like you're getting to a stage where it's like, okay, business is continuing to come, either I turn people down and I say, I can't help you because I don't have the bandwidth, or I bring on some team members and kind of, train them and how we work, how we do things, and continue to be able to help clients. But also what I realized, starting my own practice is, consulting practice, is that I missed what I had when I was internal HR, of having that team. And, we're all remote, so we don't have like the water cooler talk, but we have regular Monday meetings, we communicate throughout the day, we hop on Zoom or Teams when we need to. So it feels like, we have that same community, and it makes it less lonely in a way. But also I like to mentor. That's just something that for me personally, brings me happiness, and like, helping see people develop in their career. So if you have that tendency and you like that, then I would say like go for it. And if you have clients and you're getting busy, you just, I think the biggest thing I see in like um, mental health space is that people just, if you're billing, I think with your practice with the psychologist, like, are you billing like doctors, or not
No,
doctors, but like Medicare or like insurance at all? No,
no,
separate.
we're all pretty much private pay.
Okay. So one of the things I see is just translating the bill rate, like whatever
Mm,
you're billing to like the employees, and understanding. So the old way, the independent contractor way, is always like, okay, well, I'm going to bill $200, for this, or 500, whatever it is. And that's like, I'm going to give the employee 60% of that, or 70%, or 80. So instead of thinking about it like that, it's like breaking it down into an hourly rate, and factoring in the admin time that they're also going to be there, and training time, and all those. So I always think about what you think you're going to pay them per hour, and then add like, a buffer of like 15% on there to make sure that you're covering, and how you can have your business and still pay the bills and afford to grow. Because that's an important part. Otherwise, you're going to be super stressed out. And I've seen people who start, and they start too high because they feel like, well, if they're an independent contractor, they'd be making, I'll just say, $60 an hour. So I'm going to pay them that as an employee. Well, now you're paying the taxes. Now you got to give them sick pay. Like, so you really have to think through that and be able to explain that to the employee too. Like, as a contractor, you would get this, but you have to pay the taxes and you don't have any benefits. So we're doing this. Plus, you're getting money going into your Social Security. You're getting disability insurance. Like, there's a lot of things that come, benefits for the employee.
that's such a good point. And there's a lot, it comes up a lot because, of course, as educational psychologists, we want to get paid what we're worth.
Right.
And as business owners, if we are hiring people, there it's like you feel conflicted because you're like, well, I want to pay people what they're worth for sure. Like I want to pay well. And oh my gosh, all the overhead, right?
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a whole lot of like physical overhead, the amount of overhead, even just, like there are just so many things that you don't realize until you're actually running a business that,
Yeah.
so
Setting
then,
up that Microsoft email, like, everything has a cost. Like
uh-huh,
if you use, Box, or, Dropbox, anything where you're storing stuff, like there's a user fee for that. So it's like
yep.
when you start thinking about it, just plan for it. I mean, it doesn't have to be overwhelming, but I think you have to understand like, hey, these are the things. And then make sure your team knows too, like, we invest a lot in resources, and they have some ideas, so that they're not thinking that you're just pocketing all of this, but like, we're giving you all these tools, here's all the tools that you get with working from it. I'm not just sitting here, Miss Moneybags, like making all the money off of you and not paying you fairly. We're
Mm-hmm.
giving you a lot of resources, and maybe it's health insurance, it's 401k, all these things come into factor that you don't get as an independent contractor.
Right, right. Um, I want to just like go just real quickly because we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you like, what are things that trigger an audit? Because I don't have any idea.
Yeah, I know I was mentioning a little bit earlier, like if somebody decides, an independent contractor, to file for state disability, in California, and I've seen this, or you stop working with them and they file for unemployment, and they put, I've been working for Mine by Design, then basically the state will go and try to pull your payroll tax returns that you file when you're an employer. And so they would look and say, okay, there's no quarterly wages for this Social Security number. And this person said that they worked for you. So things like that will trigger a state audit. And those aren't a lot of fun. I have somebody I know who just went through one, and it was quite deep. And she's mostly a solopreneur, and like they went through all of her stuff. So not fun, but if they see that you're misclassifying somebody, that's when you would pay back taxes. You know, workers' comp will also do their own audits from time to time, and they might look and say, okay, this person should be, and now you owe workers' comp. Um, you know, that's still an extra fee, but they're not going to go back into the taxes and say you got to pay these back taxes like the state will do. So I feel like it's annoying and you'll have to pay more money, but it's less serious than if the contractor goes and files a disability claim or, you know, paid family leave, or any of the other, you know, benefits that California offers that you should be paying taxes into, or they should be paying out of their paycheck into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other risk, of course, is if, you know, they get disgruntled or they talk to a friend and it's like, okay, they're no longer working with me and they're like, oh, well, you know, you should have did they pay you out your PTO at terminating? Oh, no, I didn't get PTO. I was a contractor, you know, and then it's like, well, you should really go back and sue, you know, they should have given you this, you should give them this. And like, you never know. People have like, I don't remember exactly. An attorney would know like the statute, but I believe like you can go back a year. You know, I don't know what it is with an independent contractor if it's the same rule applies, but they don't have to sue within a month. You know, they can take their time on it, sit on it, and then decide to sue you. I know. And if it's an independent contractor, then chances are you weren't giving them meal and rest breaks. You know, chances are they weren't getting overtime, they weren't getting sick pay, you know. So all of these things would be looked at, and an attorney would try to claim that you owed that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a plaintiff's attorney. I know it could be a lot. It's the fear of it, you know, but again, you know, to your point earlier, if it's just a friend and you have a very small practice and you want to take that risk and you don't think anything's going to happen, you know, maybe you take that risk, you know, but if you're growing a lot and you're trying to classify, you know, everybody as a contractor, and or you have some people who are employees and some are contractors doing the same job, I think, you know, you're probably at a pretty high risk of, you know, putting yourself in an opportunity where you might get sued or you might get audited.
Yeah. Do you, in your company, do you do like how do people get in touch with you to even know if it's like what you might be able to do for them? You know, is there a way for people to talk to you about their individual circumstances? And is that like a complimentary call? Is it like you pay for an hour and see if like what they need? How do people do
Yeah.
that?
We usually do complimentary calls the first time just to understand, but people can book, you know, directly with us. Reach out, email me. It's just Shawn at strategicHRadvisory.com. But, you know, we have people on the retainer where we are, you know, support their employees and support them on an ongoing basis for their HR needs. So we're like an extension of their team. So you have 20, 30 employees and you just really want somebody else to deal with the leaves and, you know, that type of stuff. We'll help navigate that. Or employees have questions on their PTO, they can call us directly. But also we'll just do a call. Like if you're like, I'm not there yet, but I just want to talk to somebody about this situation. You know, we're happy to help. And sometimes we'll bill at a prorated rate if it's something that, you know, we need to do some research or get back to them or give them some forms or something like that. Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Well, I really appreciate this conversation. It's really nice to know that there are people out there who can help and like that HR isn't such a scary thing. I actually look at it now as like it's very helpful.
Yeah.
It gives me peace of mind. I just feel better about the decisions that I'm making because I feel like I am in risky situations as a business owner and I feel like I have people who are in my corner helping me make the least risky decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, we're always like, we're not police officers. We're not here to judge anybody. We're just here to help you so you can make informed decisions, you know,
Yeah.
right or
Yeah.
wrong, like whatever it is, we just help you, give you the information and then give you best practices on, you know, what we think works and what doesn't work. But I know a lot of people are afraid of HR being like a terminator or whatever, but we don't operate that way as consultants.
Awesome. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today and for all of your help just as my strategic HR consultant.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
That is it for today's episode of the Empower LEP podcast. I hope that you found this conversation insightful and inspiring as you navigate your journey in private practice. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us reach more LEPs and school psychologists who are looking to build their own path in private practice. For more resources and community, you can connect with me at empowerlep.com, on Instagram at EmpowerLEP, on Facebook in the Empower LEP Facebook group, or by email at jana@empowerlep.com. And just a quick reminder, the information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered legal, business, or clinical advice. Be sure to consult with the appropriate professionals for guidance on your specific situation. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, you have the skills, you have the knowledge, and you have the power to create a private practice that truly makes an impact.